Hello, friends, and welcome to What the Fringe, the podcast dedicated to all things Fringe theater. I'm your host, Lauren Hance. Each week, I visit with a Fringe artist and hear all about their endeavors and gain insight into their process. This week, I'm visiting with Payton Lombardo from World Fringe. World Fringe is the international network uniting over 300 Fringe festivals across the globe. Founded in 2007 to celebrate independent arts and amplify independent voices, World Fringe supports knowledge sharing, collaboration, and cultural exchange among festival producers, artists, and communities. Through initiatives like World Fringe Congress and World Fringe Day, the network fosters innovation, champions inclusivity, and strengthens the global fringe movement from the grassroots up.
Sometimes you see really bad actors, but they're having the best time of their lives, and it's their dream, and that's why Fringe is special, because that's okay too. But then you will see 10 minutes of an excerpt that will break your heart, and people can have that. They've got the power to do that in 10 minutes. And I've seen showcases where you just see 10 minutes. And I've left in tears. And you're like, how do you do that in 10 minutes? How have you pierced me like that with something that you've written and put on stage?
Payton Lombardo is a global culture strategist, community catalyst, and founder of World Fringe, the international network connecting over 300 Fringe festivals worldwide. A visionary leader and passionate connector, she has spent 2 decades shaping the global Fringe ecosystem, creating platforms for artistic exchange, conscious leadership, and cultural innovation. Holly mobilizes communities, challenges outdated systems, and sparks global conversations about creativity, inclusion, and the future of festivals. Holly, welcome to What the Fringe.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I am so thrilled to have you here. We have kind of been watching each other on Instagram and socials for a while, and we have been trying, I would say, close to a year to connect. And this is the world that we live in. And so I was so excited when our schedules finally aligned.
Yeah, me too.
And here we are.
Yes.
Yay.
At last. It's so great to be here. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start out. Let's talk about your journey as an artist before we kind of dive into World Fringe. How did you find your way into the theater?
I've got to be honest, I'm not actually an artist.
I disagree with that, like, so 100%. I totally disagree with that.
Well, I trained as a visual artist. Well, I did a degree in visual arts, and it was apparent very quickly. I'm from a creative family, first of all, so my family's from theatre and etc. So I've always been around creative people. My mum's an artist, etc. And yeah, most of my family do creative things, and I did a fine art degree because that's what you did in my family, and it became really apparent that I was not disciplined enough, and creating art was not my vocation, particularly not theatre. I mean, I can barely do a sound check without sort of hiding. I can public speak, fine, but any kind of performance, no. So when I was in my degree, which I did called Interactive Arts in Manchester in the UK, I started to organise club nights, and I became the social secretary of the uni, really. And people stopped going out unless I'd organise it. So I suddenly found that I was really good at organising artists and people and putting on events and kind of shaping the way things worked. So from there, I travelled to Australia and was there for a year, and I mucked about out there for a while. And then when I came back to the UK after my degree, I was like, what do I want to do? And I thought, well, I want to keep working in events. And actually, I've always gone to music festivals since I was 13. My first one was Glastonbury in 1990. That will tell you how old I am. And The Cure were headlining, Happy Monday, like these events, these live festivals changed my life. And I loved that kind of group feeling of everybody together having a joint experience and the energy that produces. So I saw hundreds of bands in the 90s, literally as many bands as you can think of, all of the greats. And it shaped that being around people who are passionate about what they do was what my passion became was kind of watching these catalysts of extraordinary exchange. And then I was asked to work at a venue in Edinburgh called the Roman Eagle Lodge, so at the Edinburgh Fringe. And I worked for the Edinburgh Festival as concert manager as well. So I was all over these arts festivals doing different things. I was in my 20s, so much energy at the time. And I was running a venue up in Edinburgh, and artists started to discover that I knew everybody, and that's always been a skill of mine. Even now I walk down the street, I'm like, oh, hi, and somehow I know everybody. And I don't know, like, I'm not sure if that's a learnt skill. It's not something I've asked for, but I do seem to know a lot of people. Artists would come to my venue in Edinburgh and be like, well, I've heard you know all about other Fringe festival directors, so where shall I take my show next? Who would you? And I said, well, Wolfgang, who runs Dublin Fringe, is also running a venue. I know he's here this weekend. Go and find him. And they'll be like, oh, thank you. And then it became overwhelming. And I was like, I can't do this for thousands of artists and festivals, so I'm going to start something. And that's where the kind of idea for World Fringe started. Then when I came back from Australia, I thought, well, I'm going to work for the festival. And somebody said to me once, find the job that you want and try and find a way to get it. So it was, I turned down several jobs, worked really bad temp work, and then I ended up working for the Brighton Festival, and then I became the coordinator, then I became head of the literary programme, and then I helped shape what is now the Fringe Festival in Brighton. So that became my baby for many years, and from that I kind of got a bit obsessed with other Fringe Festival leaders and directors, and was like, oh, well, I know there's Edinburgh, but also there's this, and there's another one over there, and I want to talk to those people and see how they do it. And there's always been an association for Fringe festivals in Canada called the Canadian Association of Fringe Festivals. So I went out there, and I think it must have been 2005, I flew to Canada, and I presented the idea of a world fringe, like a world organisation that represents all of them. And they were like, yes, like, let's embrace this. Brilliant idea. Because I'm not into stepping on people's toes. And I'm not into kind of global domination either. I want everything to be collaborative. So I went to make sure that if I was going to invest my time and energy in something, that I was barking up the right tree, and they loved the idea. And so in 2007 at the Roman Eagle Lodge in Edinburgh Fringe, I launched World Fringe, and it was great. And obviously it's been growing and growing ever since. So I'm not an artist, but I do love artists.
Well, it's really beautiful how your life has been kind of set up to put you in the place of, I mean, you're like a producer, right? And which I think is its own kind of art. You know, you connect people, you get people moving, you're doing all of those wonderful things, and there's creativity in that, right?
Definitely, yeah, there is. And I call myself a super connector, because I think that not everyone has got super connection skills, nor do they want them. Like, quite often people would be overwhelmed by the amount of comms that I have. And I put it down to being dyslexic as well, because I have that dyslexic thinking, and it's so not linear, and it is that kind of 3D picture of ecosystems that I can see really clearly, and I can map things, and I love the big picture. Like, I have tried jobs where it's just one venue in one town, and it was beautiful, but actually so restricting. I need to know the entire picture before I can make a difference in what I do. So worldwide things seem to suit me really well.
It's so beautiful. Oh, and I love that you popped over to Canada. I love the system there, which really unites all the Canadian festivals. You have to be a part of it, right? And they've got this, I don't even think Australia is as organized as is Canada, because all those artists just start on the East Coast and drive their way across Canada, hitting up all the festivals.
That's the Bliss Fringe Tour, is the Canadian circuit. And quite often it's not a money-making circuit, but it is a lifestyle. You will be put up in however many different festivals across east to west. It's that kind of people glaze over when they start talking about doing the Canadian Fringe tour. But there's USAF, which is the United States Fringe Festivals. There's the Nordic Baltic Network, which encompasses lots of festivals. And Australian and Australasian and Asian festivals are becoming more networked, which is a really brilliant thing to see. And obviously the UK fringes. And there are 70 fringe festivals in the UK. And there's a similar amount in the States as well. People can't believe it when you say there's that many around because they just think of Edinburgh.
Yes, I know. And a lot of people don't even know, especially in the States, because we're still growing in our kind of fringe presence. And I think because the US has Hollywood and New York, that fringe is taking a little bit longer for it to gain momentum. I see so many of my peers just waiting to be cast instead of going and making their own work, which is what I see more artists doing in other countries that don't kind of have those. Hollywood and New York, they're like there's some of the big guys there in the West End, but it's just not the same. And so there's kind of like this infrastructure for actors to go and participate in the arts instead of being forced to really create their own thing, which I think is better. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that is true. I think people will always be catching up on independent grassroots arts because the nature of it is that it's ever evolving, ever changing, ever reacting to the climate that we live in. And that can be political, environmental, whatever it is, economic, health, whatever it is. Fringe festivals and independence art is never afraid to address the difficult things. And that's one of the differences. And some fringes are set up to kind of change the ecology of a whole country sometimes. And they're set up, I would say, where there's a void, a fringe will pour in. So what will happen is where there is a lack of platform for artists in a town or a space, what will happen is they'll find a way. They'll just find a way because it's their vocation is to present and create and share and bring people together in different topics. So your people are always going to be catching up on what fringe is. And when we started World Fringe, it's Kath Matos and I, she's always been there with me, doing it from the beginning. And we were kind of like, what difference are we going to make other than bringing people together? Like, that is a valid, really important, like have those cultural exchanges and conversations and synergies with each other. But what are we going to change? And when in 2005, around then, people didn't even really know what Edinburgh Fringe was. I mean, it's been going a long time and it was massive, but it was the Edinburgh Festival. No one cares that there's 8 festivals happening at once. And it doesn't really matter to the audience which festival they go to as long as they're there. I was frustrated by the fact that programmers of international and programme festivals thought that fringe meant bad quality. It was juggling in the street and it was just not worth looking at as a producer or a booker. And so our mission was to kind of bring the fringe sector or create a sector for fringe first, bring it out from beneath the programmed international festivals and make it into a sector in its own right. That is something that World Fringe has achieved, and that's probably my most proud achievement ever, is the fact that together, and I don't take the credit solely, I take the credit for starting World Fringe, but I hold the framework. Everyone else does the stuff. Quite often I get blown away by the responses that I get globally. It can get quite beautifully overwhelming, not horribly, but incredibly overwhelming, in the amount of passion and support there is for each other.
Ah, I love it. I want to speak into what you were mentioning about people having this preconception of fringe, of it's just, little street performers and, I don't know, someone's in a cafe doing something strange, because I have seen some of the absolute best art in my life at fringe festivals, especially from artists that are touring, because it takes so much to tour and they are pouring so much in, and I'm like, they are just oozing with talent. And what did it take to get more notoriety, not just with audiences, but kind of broader platforms to get people to want to pick up these shows and give them a life outside of Fringe?
For the shows themselves, well, there's a lot of right place at the right time, but also there's a lot of hard graft and natural talent there as well. So I guess it's that perfect storm of all of those things. I don't think that you can put a show on and not market yourself. And I think that's where Fringe can be quite difficult, is that you have to be all things. So you have to be able to be marketing, producing, financier, actor, director, writer sometimes, set, costume. You've got to do all of it. You've got to be the jack of all trades when it comes to Fringe sometimes, not always. And every Fringe and every artist is different. But you're right, you do see some of the stars of the future. Well, all the stars, everybody has to come through Fringe. It's the start of the food chain when it comes to, and independent arts is the start of the food chain when it comes to, there would be no West End, there would be no big film stars if it wasn't for that grassroots. Very few people, unless they go to stage school, I suppose, will go straight into those positions. And not everyone wants that, but what I find amazing is sometimes I question where my passion for it comes from. And I just love people who are unapologetically themselves. As long as it's not hurting anybody or racist or misogynist or whatever it is, as long as it's not anti, then if I don't particularly like it, sometimes you see really bad actors, but they're having the best time of their lives and it's their dream. And that's why Fringe is special, because that's okay too. But then you will see 10 minutes of an excerpt that will break your heart. And people can have that. They've got the power to do that in 10 minutes. And I've seen showcases where you just see 10 minutes. And I've left in tears. And you're like, how do you do that in 10 minutes? How have you pierced me like that with something that you've written and put on stage? And that could be music or theatre or whatever, poetry, whatever it is. Like the innovation that once there's a guy, and I wish I could remember his name to credit him, but he did the poetry brothel in Brighton. And it was such a cool idea. He had this house and people would come in and they'd awkwardly sit together in the sitting room downstairs. And then one by one they'd get taken into spaces and rooms in the house to be read poetry. So it's like a poetry brothel and you were just sort of taken off. And it's these kind of like innovative, crazy but brilliant nuggets that are just like will stick with you for life. As an audience member, if you've seen something good in Fringe, then you'll remember it forever.
Absolutely. That's so true. The first kind of was immersive show that I saw, Siobhan O'Loughlin, she's from the States, but she does this show called Broken Bone Bathtub. And it takes place in a bathroom. And she is in a bathtub. And she's got her little hand in a cast. And she does this like hour-long show. And you sit there with her. And she's got the bubbles. And somebody got to wash her hair. And somebody washes her back. And I was like, what is this? We didn't talk about this when I was in university. Like, this was not, what is this? It was so cool.
People's minds are incredible. I don't have that in me at all. I just love people that do. I love people that they care, but also they don't. And they just want to do. So it's that, yeah, I love it. I love those people. That's why I do what I do.
I totally believe Fringe is the future in a world where there is more digital curation. There's a lot of slop that's being put out. There's a lot of things that are just trying to tap into exactly who you are and cater to that rather than exposing you to something new. And in a digital online where we don't always know what's real, to be in a room with someone who has created something, they have 10 minutes to set it up. There's no bells and whistles. There's very few in most shows. I think people are going to be longing for that.
I think so. Somebody said to me the other day that theatre is one of the very few spaces now where you don't look at your phone for if it's an hour or 2 hours. And I was trying to think of other places where you don't look at your phone, but you do in concerts because you're filming everything. And I think, yes, in the theatre, watching a play, you don't check your phone. And I think, yeah, you're right. It is one of the last few places that are left where you're not connected to a screen. And that is really important to remember.
It is. And it's real. You know, it's real. You are experiencing that moment with the performer, with the audience. We're all here together. We're all having this experience together in real time. It's exciting.
So important. Yeah, group experiences are, like you say, in a digital world where we're connected by our phones. And they are helpful in many, I wouldn't live without mine. I'm on it all the time. It is a relief to still have theatre and dance and live performance, long may it live.
Right. Well, and even I'm thinking about that poetry brothel. My brain's just going, maybe you go in with a friend. Well, you get in one room, they get in another. You still kind of have this similar experience, but you get to come out and go, what did you hear? What did I hear? And you don't get to record it. You don't get to go look. It's just us like humans telling each other.
It's a moment. But you're having that experience with the person reading you poetry. I think it can be quite intense. But how cool is that?
It's so beautiful. Okay, so I want to talk about the festival leaders. I feel like as artists, there are a lot of leaders who are very accessible that want to help and want to talk to you. I find most festival leaders are just absolutely wonderful human beings and are champions for the artists. Some of them are artists, some of them aren't, because they've got that more kind of logistical mind. But let's get a little peek behind the curtain for artists as to what our friends who are leading these festivals that allow us to do our weird things that we come up with in our brains, what are they needing from each other and from artists and to make these things run?
Well, money. Put it simply, no, they are extraordinary people. They are the kind of innovators I just think of the whole cultural sectors, really. They're the ones who are shaping it and it trickles into those other spaces. They're really passionate because they have to be, because why else would they do it? Some of them are artists. A lot of them are volunteers, which is incredible. A lot of them are people who are passionate about the audiences and the town or city that their festival resides in and, or the country, and they're shaping it in different ways. They need each other, really. And we do a World Fringe Congress every 2 years, and that started in Edinburgh in a partnership with Edinburgh Fringe. Everybody comes together every other year and we run this thing called a closing circle. And the first time we did it, I was not really prepared for the outcomes of that. And what happened was people were much more, they're very open. So Fringe leaders are incredibly generous when it comes to sharing with each other and with the artists and the venues and producers, everybody they work with. They're very generous people. And this sort of like pouring of how it had changed them to realize that they were amongst peers and amongst people who were doing the same thing as them. And even though they're in different countries with totally different frameworked fringe festivals and sizes, their issues were the same and their challenges were the same. And just to know that. And sometimes, if they're in a country that is repressed or an area that is in repression of some kind, to know that there are other people who have freedom as well to express, it just fills you with energy, doesn't it? So it gives you, every time we come together, we are stronger as a whole. An international cultural sector is stronger, and that filters to the artists, everybody who works in them, the venues, and essentially that kind of sense of pride of place, which I know is a bit of a buzzword, but it's true. It makes people really proud of the places that they're from. And they don't just address the lack of art, they also address community need as well. So they'll do things with young people in challenging situations. They will confront politics head on in a space where you can do that because it's theatre, and people need to understand how passionate they are, and they do it for the love a lot of the time. Some are paid, some aren't, and they just need connectivity. And hopefully that is something that World Fringe, that Kath and I, and everyone who works with us, we've got some ambassadors as well. So everyone who engages and works with us is a part of that.
I think it's interesting that you've got this like group of leaders. Again, like the people that I run into are so passionate and so kind. I think I had this very like misconception of like, oh, the people at the top, they're scary. It's like, can I talk to them? And, but they're just some of the most giving people. And why do you think Fringe and Fringe leaders kind of attract these type of kind, giving people? And what do you think the world has to learn from them and their style of leadership?
I think quite a lot of the time people in the arts are asked, what can the arts learn from business? But I also flip that and say, what can business learn from the arts? Which is, it is that generosity of spirit and sharing and recognizing that there is so much importance in communal gain, and it isn't just for yourself. The world becomes a better place when we all work together. And different systems work for different people, right? So I was on the board of the British Arts Festivals Association for 11 years. And programme festivals, what I noticed was that they shield their events because they want to have that big launch and be like, look who's coming. It's amazing. And there's reason for that. It's not a horrible way of doing things. It's just the way that happens. Whereas Fringe is like, oh, so-and-so's coming. We're trying to get them on board. And there's so much upfront sharing that it's not shielded until a time that, like, if they have an idea, they want everybody to have that idea. If they found a supplier that is cheap, they want everyone to know about it. If they find a funder that is really good, they will share it. There's no shielding at all. They all share. And I think that is something that is really beautiful and really amazing. And I can see instantly the gain that you get from behaving like that. So I guess society could learn from that as a start off. I mean, there's so much more, but
way too many thoughts going through my brain, especially what's happening in my country. But we do our thing and we do it well, and we just keep trotting on. Artists have always found a way.
You can't stop art. It will happen in the face of war. It will happen in the face of oppression, all of it. We had the Ukraine Fringe took place in a war zone. And that is so humblingly amazing that they still had the energy to need to get that output. It's absolutely beautiful.
It speaks to what the human spirit needs. I mean, I struggle as an artist because you don't always get the monetary gain, right? And I live in a capitalist country that puts everything into the dollar or the money, the change. And there is something outside of that feeds us and makes us human.
Absolutely. And it's very, it's important to remember that these things, festivals have happened since the beginning of time. People have got together for joint fun experiences, and it's important to have fun. Like, if that is the purpose, that's okay. It doesn't have to be politically binding. It doesn't have to be regenerative. It can just be fun. And sometimes we forget that just having fun for fun's sake is still okay. And it's not just okay. You have to. You just have to. It's so important. You have to.
It's necessary. It's so necessary.
I mean, what's life without fun?
Right. I mean, like you're saying, the Ukraine, it's like there's this war going on, and they're like, we have to remember we're human. We have to have joy, and we have to connect, and we have to remember that, we're all just walking this earth the best we can. I want to ask you, because you said you have artists that come and talk to you, especially earlier on your career. What kind of advice would you give a fringe artist? I'm sure you've got like 50 things popping into your head right now. What would be maybe the top one or two things for a fringe artist?
Well, it depends on which fringe you go to, but I would always do your research. Try and visit first any fringe festival that you're going to, particularly Edinburgh. or you cannot go without visiting first, even if it's for a couple of days. And that's one thing I noticed when I was running the venue. When people didn't, it was such a shock, and they lost money and it wasn't what they're expecting. You know, Edinburgh is the conduit of which we all go around, as is other big city venues and fringe spaces. But there are many fringe festivals, and you have to decide why you're doing that festival in particular. Is it because it's nearby? Is it because you know them? Is it because they have specialists in music? Is it because you want that lifestyle sort of blissful tour across Canada? Make sure you budget. Like, these are creepy, horrible sort of like things to discuss, and dry, where they're just like, make sure that you know what you're doing when you get there, I think is probably my biggest. But also recognise that fringe leaders know each other. Most of them know each other, and everyone knows us and World Fringe, and we all talk. We've got a WhatsApp group with 200 of us on it, and we all chat all the time. And it's not spammed or anything, but we have, all the fringe leaders through World Fringe are connected. So someone might say, oh, this came up in our festival. Has anyone got an advice on that? Or, by the way, I'm in Adelaide. I've seen this show. You all need to somehow try and get it to your fringe. So they all talk with each other. They will introduce you to each other as well. They're generous of spirit in that way. So research, a bit dry, but that's what I would say.
No, it's good because it's, we don't know. We don't always know. You're starting out.
There's loads of forums. There's like a USA to Edinburgh forum, and that's really helpful. There are other forums for it. So, I think ask questions.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Man, we've had such a good conversation, and I feel like we just started, but we're down to our last famous question here on What the Fringe. So what, Miss Holly, has been your most interesting or awkward fringe interaction you've ever had? Or something heartwarming?
World Fringe Day is the 11th of July. And what blows my mind quite often, there's two things. First one is that the global reach, when we use the hashtag World Fringe Day, one day of the year, I don't use that social thing any other time of the year, is over 80 million. And that is the reach that we have as a sector. Yeah. And, if there is anyone who has business acumen listening to this and wants to help me do something with that figure, then I would do it on behalf of all of the fringes. But that blows my mind. Like, it's huge. This is a very powerful and important sector and network of people. But the other thing is, and it goes back to kind of like, I think I do it without ego, and I don't think I've got a big ego, but I do have to check that, we all have to check ourselves. Am I doing this because I like people saying World Fringe is great? Well, I don't take any credit at all of any of the festival's outputs, any of the artists' outputs. I have no credit at all for that. But one thing that does stand me in my tracks sometimes is the amount of people who've come up to me and said that I've changed their lives. And I guess that's where it becomes a bit awkward, because I don't know how to respond to that. It's beautiful, and wow. If I've even done that for one person, then I've achieved something that is out of my comprehension, really. Somebody came up to me once, an artist said, I had given up. I don't want to do it anymore. It's too hard. And I came to one of your talks, and since then I just had to find you, because I've toured the world in the last year, and I've refound vitalized my life. And that was because of you. And I was like that. Like, I don't know how to respond, except for like, wow, well, good for you. But actually you did this because you went out and you reinvigorated yourself. I might have instigated a thought process, but, and other people have said it as well in festivals, and they're like, well, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have done that. And yeah, I don't know how to take that, because as a vocation, I don't know how to do anything else. I connect people. I will always, because I know so many, I'm like, oh, you need to go and meet them and they'll be doing this. And I do it even in a micro in my village that I live in. I will end up setting up some kind of network and introducing people and supporting and helping. If I think too deeply about it, I feel a bit awkward. There is no money in World Fringe. We've always had it free to access because we want it to be available for any fringe who needs it, any artist who needs it. There is no fee payment. Although some of the fringes do make donations towards it, it doesn't pay for it. It's an amazing network of people and it always has been, but I don't do it for the money. But then nor do the artists sometimes and nor do the festivals. So some of them, that's World Fringe, that's it. It's a passion.
You have the heart of an artist, Holly. It's so evident. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on What the Fringe. I'm so glad we finally got to connect and have this conversation. And I'm so excited to just be able to share it with people so they can hear, from you anytime they want.
Anytime, worldfringe.com. And also big shout out to Kath Matos, who is my second in command on World Fringe. She's a rock.
All right. Well, mark your calendars for that famous World Fringe Day on the 11th of July. It is a global celebration of the bold, brilliant, and boundary-pushing spirit of Fringe. From street corners to main stages, this is a day to honor the creativity, freedom, and community that Fringe festivals ignite around the world. If you want to discover what's happening across the globe on the Fringe scene, check out that Fringe calendar at worldfringe.com. And you can explore festivals, key dates, opportunities to get involved, whether you're a performer, producer, or just that amazing super fan. And please follow and tag World Fringe on Instagram at World Fringe. And that is where they're going to spotlight festivals year round, share artist features, and celebrate the independent arts movement with a global lens. Wherever you are, whatever you're making, there's a Fringe for you. Join the celebration, share the love, and fringe the world, baby. What the Fringe is produced and hosted by me, Lauren Hantz. This episode was edited by Ben Ellis of Renowned Media, and those sweet tunes you hear are provided by Paul Snyder of Orchestra of Sound, and our logo was designed by Ruby Arnold of Ruby Makes Things. What the Fringe can be found on your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know when new episodes release, and keep up with What the Fringe on Instagram at whatthefringe_productions, and find us online at whatthefringeproductions.com. Flyering is just part of the job when you do Fringe. And, to do it right, you have to keep it in balance and you have to keep this perspective in mind.
I'm not into stepping on people's toes and I'm not into global domination either.